BBC 973, London's biggest conversation, with David Miller and Owen Jones.
Yes, David, here with Owen. Kenneth is on the Costa Packet or somewhere, being very shy and coy about telling us where he's going. But anyway, he's off making a speech somewhere, so we'll hope that those who are receiving his words of wisdom are grateful for it. And meanwhile, you have to make do with us. We've been talking about the economy, and there's a few texts and tweets before we move on to one of the other big topics of the week, immigration. Anonymous text here. David says it says the rich are the only ones feeling the recovery. Us mere mortals are suffering badly. High bills, low wages. And when interest rates rise next year, thousands of us will lose our homes. Neil from Warlingham says, David, the Labour Party constantly talk about it's taking longer than any other previous recession to recover. What they fail to recognise is that this recession, unlike previous ones, was debt-fuelled, and as such, it has taken companies and households longer to deleverage, and therefore there's a slower recovery. And let's remind ourselves which party ever saw such huge increases in personal borrowing and equity withdrawal. I imagine you've got a few as well, Evan.
Got a few, yeah. Not also very chirpy, I have to say. Andrew on Twitter said the economic recovery is for big corporations, millionaires and landed gentry. Written, I run a software business and my workers ain't feeling it. And a text, I think this is probably along your lines, David, I have to say. I'm amazed that anyone would be puzzled by the average person not feeling benefits of the upsurge in the economy. Overpopulation means less jobs and lower wages, 50% of them part-time. Apparent solution, a New Year present with millions more joining us. Not quite sure where millions is coming from, I have to say, not to dispute whoever is texted in, but that's not actually what is going to happen in
Well, I mean, you don't know that. Well, because 3 million people came in under the last Labour government, and they made the mistake of underestimating it, and they now admit that was wrong, but you still think millions aren't there?
Well, we at UKIP have been distributing pamphlets to people saying the entire population of Bulgaria and Romania, 29 million, they actually got it wrong, it's above the population of Bulgaria and Romania, are going to come flooding to
I think 29 million, but I honestly don't think, I say this to you more seriously, I don't think anybody should underestimate the forces that drive people to come here. It really doesn't lie in the mouths of people saying, oh, it's not much of a problem, because you stand on the shoulders of people saying, it's not much of a problem. And Jack Straw spent this week acknowledging it was one hell of a problem. They made a mistake.
If we're going to have a balanced debate about immigration, which is always a tricky feat to pull off, I have to say, let's talk about all those immigrants coming in here, propping up our essential services, like the National Health Service, like those Indian and Pakistani and Nigerian nurses and doctors who help deliver people into the world, who look after people when they're ill and sick, who save, in my case, I had an elderly nurse and immigrant doctor looking after my grandma as she sadly passed away last year. These are the people airbrushed out of existence, and I have to say, it's very convenient for politicians who are responsible for not building enough housing to meet people's needs, who haven't created proper secure jobs, to go, don't blame us, blame that immigrant instead.
You see, what you mustn't do is set up stereotypes and then knock them over. I personally have no issue with London being an international centre. My whole life revolves around the joys of London being an international centre of the business I do. I think the problem that we have made is bringing in people from overseas who enhance our economy is one thing. Bringing in, these Roma gypsies that are making a nuisance of themselves in Sheffield and elsewhere. That is a bad.
Come on, let's not generalise about an entire group of people. Roma, and it's easy to do that, Dave. And the reason I want to pull you up.
It's not me doing that, it's David Blunkett who's doing
well,
that.
Well, he had shades of Enoch Powell with what he said, and he should be condemned for it. Talking about riots, I mean, it's irresponsible for a politician to talk in those terms.
I mean, I've seen some film. I happen to be up in your part of the world, in Yorkshire, making a speech in Huddersfield on Thursday night. There was a big thing on the regional news up there, and the way some local people, interestingly, local people who mainly themselves of Pakistan origin, were absolutely revolted by these people from Slovakia were behaving, and their behaviour was appalling the whole of their neighbours. At a certain point, that then does turn to violence.
Well, I think it's sad when any community who themselves have been on the receiving end of bigotry should should generalise about another. Look, travellers have lived in this country for hundreds of years, and what we should be focusing on, instead of people like David Blunkett stirring things up with nightmare talk of riots on the streets, is how we actually improve relationships between communities, and that means getting representatives of those communities together.
You're assuming that we just have to sit back and any number of these folk can come here and we just have to put up with them.
No.
That's not what I think. Anyway, well, we need to move on to our guest, but if you want to join in this discussion about immigration, about who should have the right to live in the UK, and of course the really fundamental question, which was actually being put by David Blunkett, which is, if people come over here, do they have the right then to continue to live exactly as they lived in their previous country of origin, or do they not have to make some concessions for the fact they are here? And a lot of people see them as a burden and not as an asset. 08456060973 is the number to call. Text 84850, email David and Owen at lbc.co.uk, and tweet at lbc973. Well, I was struck in the week by a typically perceptive column by Peter Oborne from the Daily Telegraph, really talking about the European ideal, but saying that the European ideal was now being put under huge threat, because when free passage of people, passage of people across borders in the European community was thought up, it was Western European nations that generally had a lot of lot in common. But now, with the arrival of a lot of Eastern European countries, where the difference in standard of living was huge, inevitably the flow of people has been greater, and it's much more difficult, I think, Peter, you were saying, for that to any longer be seen as an asset, but more as something that is going to cause social incohesion rather than cohesion. Peter, do you want to just expand, for those who didn't have the benefit of reading your piece, do you want to just go over the theory you were espousing there?
Well, what I was doing was pointing out that free movement of people, as articulated by the founders of the European Union, is obviously a wonderful idea. When people move freely from Spain to England to France, Germany and so on, they're moving between countries with roughly the same standard of living, roughly the same income, and quite a lot of shared cultural assumptions. Now, when it comes to the Romania and Bulgaria, that isn't the case. That I think I'm right in saying that the average wage in this country is approximately £20,000 a year. In Bulgaria, it's about £2,500 a year. I think the average wage in Bulgaria or Romania is less than half the minimum wage in Britain. And this creates two things. One, it's very bad for it means it's financial madness not to make the journey from Eastern Europe to Western Europe. And it's very bad for Eastern European countries because there's a terrible brain drain. It tends to be their best people who come in. Many of them come over, they're doctors, they're professors, they're businessmen, but also it's very, very bad for people that Jones has written about so eloquently, actually, the English working classes, because they are undercut in the job market. It's fantastic news for big business, which gets a very cheap source of labour.
Well, Peter, can I just take you up on that? I mean, as ever, your columns are always very eloquently, very beautifully written and argued. But, I mean, firstly, I think it relies on the assumption that the only reason people move is because of money, when lots of people living in Romania and Bulgaria have family networks, they've lived there for generations, they're culturally proud of their country. Why would they just up sticks because of that? And the second point is, well, actually, according to all the research, it's not actually the case. The real reason people's wages have been falling is immigration. It's far more complex reasons, like globalisation, like weak trade unions. Immigrants have been just quite a handy scapegoat for far more profound reasons for people's pay packet shrinking all the time.
Well, actually, immigration is just one part of globalization. I mean, it is part of the process you're describing. And weak trade unions, because the emergent employers can, as you know, will be able to use the gang masters who will commandeer the young men, mainly desperate for work, into gangs. and send them off to work, and they will undercut. I mean, they destroy the great work, the honourable work done by trade unions in this country and across Western Europe to guarantee a fair wage and fair living standards and fair standards at work.
See, Peter, it's a double whammy, really, isn't it? Because those who come who are desperate to work, the danger is they do undercut existing labour norms and do deprive British people of a job who aren't prepared to work for below what is traditionally been regarded in the UK as an appropriate wage. But of course, watching that film, as I was doing the other day, about circumstances in that bit of Sheffield that's been taken over by these Roma gypsies, they seem to be desperate not to work. You've suggested, and they're happy to live on benefits, which of course are much more than they would actually get working in Romania. But you were saying, Peter, in your column, that you think the situation is serious enough that, you know, we're sort of sleepwalking into this, what some of us will regard as a disaster of letting in Romanians and Bulgarians on the 1st of January. You were suggesting that the Prime Minister should actually refuse to do that. He should rescind that until such time as we are able and ready to receive a further, what you think would be substantial influx.
Well, yeah, I point out that the experts, i.e. the Home Office and the politicians 10 years ago, when a similar thing happened from Poland, said that about 13,000 maximum, between 5 and 13,000 a year was the official estimate. In fact, over the following 10 years or so, but more than 1 million Poles, I think I'm right in saying,
yes,
came into Britain. Now, it just shows you that the official estimates are rubbish. Now, I'm not making any predictions at all, but what I am saying is that the European Union is now in a crisis. It's now turned into an anti-democratic organisation. I mean, these are that film in Sheffield, whatever else it showed, is that thanks to European Union laws, the way in which people are living in this country has been transformed very dramatically.
Well, Peter, sorry to interrupt. I mean, firstly, I actually have sympathies with the argument you're making about the lack of democracy in the EU. I don't know why that's always left to the right to point out. I think others should as well. But actually, I just have to take, I mean, David makes this point, and it really has to be taken on, this idea of immigrants living off benefits, because I'm sure you saw it, Peter. The UCL did this brilliant study on immigration earlier this month, and they found that immigrants are net contributors to public finances.
A lot of them don't.
Because they're, wait a minute, David, they take a third more, they pay a third more in taxes than they receive in benefits. They're far less likely to take benefits than the rest of us.
Yeah, I mean, that study is, as you know, contentious. I mean, it has been challenged, but on the other hand, I'm slightly inclined to go along with what you're saying there, Owen. I mean, I think that if people, the laws can be tightened up, even under European, you can't just turn up here and demand benefits. You've got to be looking for work, and you've got, in the same way that British citizens are looking for work, they have to really be looking to work in order to apply for benefits. And I think that same thing, exactly the same, is going to apply to other European citizens who turn up in Britain. So I think there is a danger of a bit of a myth around benefit structures and immigrants.
We better leave it there. It's fascinating as ever talking to you, Peter. Even when I don't agree with you, you always put it very, very eloquently indeed. That's Peter Oborne, who's the Daily Telegraph's chief political commentator. And we're asking, do you trust Labour on immigration? Maybe you want to actually challenge the idea immigration is a bad thing and talk about the NHS, but maybe you want to talk about the impact on your local communities too. Love to hear from you. It's 0845 6060 973. This is LBC 90.